The terminal buzzed with the usual airport chaos, announcements blaring, luggage wheels clattering, and travelers weaving through crowds. Amidst the commotion, Director Elara Vance stepped off the plane at Halverson National Airport, her posture upright, eyes scanning the surroundings with practiced vigilance. A sudden tap on her shoulder halted her stride. "Ma'am, may I see your identification?" Two uniformed officers stood before her, their expressions unreadable. Elara reached into her coat pocket, producing her credentials. "Director Elara Vance, Federal Investigations Bureau," she stated, her voice steady. The officers exchanged glances, skepticism flickering in their eyes. "Please come with us for further verification." Confusion and disbelief surged within her, but she maintained composure. "Is there a problem with my identification?" "Just a routine check, ma'am." As they escorted her through the terminal, passengers began to notice the unusual scene. Phones were raised, recording the unfolding incident. Elara's silence was deliberate, her gaze unwavering. Outside, a black SUV awaited. Agent Tessa Moraine, her trusted aide, opened the door. "Director, are you all right?" Elara nodded, sliding into the seat. Inside the vehicle, Tessa handed her a tablet. "The footage is already circulating online. Public outcry is intensifying." Elara reviewed the video, her own composed demeanor evident on screen. "This isn't the first time," she murmured. Tessa's phone buzzed incessantly, calls from officials, media, and concerned citizens. Internal Affairs has initiated an investigation. The officers have been suspended pending review. Elara's expression remained stoic, but a storm brewed beneath the surface. The next morning, she stood before a sea of reporters, cameras flashing. "Yesterday's incident highlights a deeper issue, systemic bias that persists in our institutions," she declared. Her words resonated, sparking nationwide discussions. Later, in a private conference room, Elara faced officers Dennett and Keene. She placed photographs on the table, images of her family, her career milestones, her community work. "These are the lives affected by your assumptions," she said, her tone firm. Dennett shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Keene met her gaze, a flicker of remorse in his eyes. "Power doesn't have a single face," she continued. "Wearing a badge requires rising above personal biases." As the meeting concluded, Keene extended a tentative apology. Dennett remained silent. Back in her office, Elara sifted through letters, some supportive, others critical. One caught her attention, a note from a retired officer acknowledging his own blind spots. She placed it in her desk drawer, a reminder of the work ahead. That evening, as she walked the bureau's halls, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily. A sudden alert on her phone drew her attention. An anonymous message: "They won't stop at detainment. Be prepared." Her pulse quickened. Outside, a shadow moved past the window. Elara reached for her phone, dialing Tessa. No answer. She tried again. Still no response. A knock echoed through the empty corridor. She approached cautiously. Another knock, louder this time. Hand on the doorknob, she hesitated. The door creaked open. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Director Janessa Rhodes' office, casting long shadows on the polished floor. She sat at her desk, eyes fixed on the screen displaying the viral video of her wrongful detention at Halverson National Airport. The public outcry had been swift and fierce, igniting debates across the nation. Her phone buzzed incessantly with calls from officials, media outlets, and concerned citizens. Yet, amidst the chaos, Janessa remained composed, her focus unwavering. She knew this incident was more than a personal affront. It was a symptom of a deeper, systemic issue. Later that day, she stood before a sea of reporters, delivering a concise yet powerful statement. "This isn't about me," she began, her voice steady. "It's about the persistent biases that plague our institutions. It's about accountability." Her words resonated, sparking further discussions on racial profiling and systemic reform. Behind closed doors, Janessa met with officers Darnell and Kieran, the men responsible for her detention. She presented them with photographs from her life and career, illustrating the weight of their assumptions. One officer listened, remorse evident in his eyes. The other remained stoic, his gaze unyielding. Determined to effect change, Janessa initiated a comprehensive review of bias training within the Bureau. She collaborated with experts, community leaders, and fellow officials to develop a program aimed at addressing and mitigating implicit biases. Letters of support poured in, including one from a retired officer who acknowledged his own blind spots. As weeks passed, Janessa continued her work quietly, meeting with students, attending community events, and overseeing the implementation of the new training program. Her resolve never wavered, even as challenges arose. One evening, as she walked the halls of the bureau, a note was slipped under her office door. It read, "Change is coming, but not everyone welcomes it." The message was unsigned, the handwriting unfamiliar. Janessa stared at the note, her mind racing. The revelation was clear. Resistance to change was not only external, but also internal. The path ahead would be fraught with obstacles, but Janessa was prepared to face them head-on. The city pulsed with unease. News outlets buzzed with speculation, and social media platforms were ablaze with theories that in the heart of the metropolis, Director Elara Vance sat in her office, the weight of the nation's scrutiny pressing down on her shoulders. The recent events at the airport had not only tarnished her reputation, but also ignited a firestorm of controversy. The public demanded answers, and Elara knew that the truth was more convoluted than anyone could imagine. She reviewed the footage once more, her eyes scanning every frame for inconsistencies. The officer's actions were not just a lapse in judgment, they were calculated. But why? What was their motive? A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Agent Leora entered, her expression grave. "Director, we've uncovered something," Leora began, placing a file on the desk. "It's about the officers. Their records have been tampered with. Someone wanted to erase their past." Elara's heart raced. Who would go to such lengths? Leora hesitated. "We believe it's someone within our ranks. Someone with access to classified information." The revelation was staggering. Elara realized that the conspiracy ran deeper than she had anticipated. Trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. Determined to uncover the truth, Elara convened a secret task force, selecting only those she trusted implicitly. Their mission: to delve into the depths of the bureau and expose the traitor within. As the investigation progressed, they discovered a web of deceit, with connections to high-ranking officials and clandestine organizations. The implications were staggering, threatening to destabilize the very foundation of the bureau. Elara knew that exposing the truth would come at a cost, but she was prepared to sacrifice everything to restore integrity and justice. In a final confrontation, Elara faced the mastermind behind the conspiracy. The betrayal cut deep, but her resolve remained unshaken. With evidence in hand, she prepared to reveal the truth to the world. As she stood before the press, the weight of the nation's gaze upon her, Elara began to speak, her voice steady and unwavering. "The truth," she declared, "will no longer be hidden." The room fell silent, anticipation hanging thick in the air. Elara took a deep breath, ready to unveil the secrets that had plagued the bureau for far too long. But before she could utter another word, the lights flickered, and the room plunged into darkness. The room was silent, too silent. Elara Vance stood with her back to the old conference table. Dust still coated the corners. A long dead bulb flickered above her. The box was still in her hand, metal, heavy, unmarked. The last message from Tessa had ended mid-sentence. Then nothing. Not a call. Not a signal. Not a trace. Elara hadn't waited for authorization. She didn't trust the system anymore. She brought only her badge, her sidearm, and her instincts. They hadn't failed her yet. She turned the box over in her hands again. No lock. No hinge. Just pressure points, 4. Top, bottom, both sides. It clicked as her fingers aligned. A slow hiss. The lid eased open. Inside, for memory drives. All identical. But underneath them, a slip of paper, folded tight, yellowed at the edges. She read the words. Once. Twice. A third time. Then she dropped into the nearest chair, the wind knocked from her chest. Project Meridian. Initiated 2009. Redactors Hawthorne Keys v. Hill, Elara Vance authorizing. Her name. Not scribbled. Not forged. Printed. Official. Embedded in the program header. That wasn't possible. She was still at Quantico in 2009. Still green. Still shadowing analysts. She had never authorized anything. Never heard of Meridian. Never worked under anyone named V. Hill. She stood slowly. Knees stiff. Eyes locked on the document. Mind racing. Whoever forged that file knew how to bury lies inside truth. This wasn't just disinformation. It was a plant. A trap. The door creaked behind her. Elara turned, gun raised. Tessa stood in the doorway. Alone. Pale. Shaken. "No one followed me," she said. But her eyes said something else. "What happened to you?" Elara asked. Tessa didn't speak. Just walked past her, sat down. and pulled out a small envelope. No markings. Inside photos. Printed. Real. They showed an office. The same old room Elara was standing in. Same chairs. Same wall marks. Same light flicker. But the people in the photos weren't them. They were older. Dark suits. Tight faces. No smiles. 5 of them. One woman, her face turned. A man with a scar on his jawline. Another man in a bureau blazer. And Elara stared harder. The last photo. A blurry image. But unmistakable. The woman had her build. Her posture. But the face was off. Like someone had mapped her features through time and projected a distorted version. Older. Cold. You seeing it too? Tessa whispered. That's not me, Elara said. It can't be. Tessa didn't respond. Elara pulled out her phone. Tried the FBI mainline. Nothing. Static. She tried her backup. Scrambled signal. Then a soft click. Then, Elara Vance, a voice rasped. Who is this? But the voice continued like it hadn't heard her. You were never supposed to find the room. You were never supposed to break the cycle. The line went dead. The chill in her spine snapped sharp. She turned back to the table. The 4 drives were gone. So was the slip of paper. Only the empty box remained. But Tessa hadn't moved. Elara stared at her. Her hands were empty. Her eyes hollow. Tessa, I didn't take them. But there was something in her voice. Flat. Slow. Like she wasn't fully here. Elara stepped closer. Where did you go after we lost contact? Tessa blinked. Slowly. There was a black van. I followed it. I shouldn't have. They took me to a warehouse near the water. Lights everywhere. They didn't speak. Just played audio. Over and over. What kind of audio? Tessa hesitated. Then her voice dropped. Your file. Your real one. The one they buried. Elara's pulse quickened. They said you approved this entire operation. That you were one of the founders of Meridian. That you ordered it sealed. No, Elara said. That's not true. But her voice wasn't sure anymore. Not fully. They said you don't remember because you weren't meant to. They said you're a contingency. What does that mean? Tessa stood. Her body moved like it was fighting something invisible. They said your memory was edited. Cleaned. Planted. They used you to carry Meridian forward. Every decade, someone new. But it's always the same design. Different face. She reached into her jacket. Pulled out a small chip. Placed it on the table. This was embedded in your old service revolver. I scanned it. Elara picked it up. The surface shimmered. Barely visible letters etched into the glass. VX 2009 reset. She turned it over. Underneath 3 names. Tessa Moraine. Elara Vance. V. Hill. They had profiles for all of us, Tessa said. But mine stopped after 2016. Yours had entries from this year. And Hill's. Elara felt the nausea hit before she heard the words. Was still active. That name again. Hill. The shadow in every corridor. The ghost in every archive. Tessa, where did they take you? I don't know. What did they look like? I don't remember. She looked lost now. Fractured. Elara paced the room. Breath sharp. Mind burning. They're trying to scrub everything. Whoever they are. Tessa nodded weakly. The room's wired, she said suddenly. Elara froze. She looked around. Walls. Ceiling. Under the table. She found it. A pin-sized lens. Watching. Recording. She yanked it out. Then the building shook. Not violently. But enough. A subtle pulse. Then a high-pitched beep. Time to go, Elara said. They didn't wait. They ran. Down stairwells. Through a basement tunnel that hadn't seen footsteps in years. When they emerged, the building behind them flickered. Then, darkness. The grid cut. City blocks went black. Elara, look, Tessa said, pointing across the street. Unmarked vans. Same ones Tessa had described. Parked. Silent. Waiting. They ran again. This time to an old FBI vehicle parked behind a warehouse. Elara hot-wired it without a word. As they drove, Elara spoke. There's a site. An old cold storage center. Off-grid. No bureau access. We go there. We back up everything we've got. Tessa didn't answer. Her eyes were on the road behind them. Elara, they're following. 4 headlights. No tags. No signals. No plates. Hold tight. She swerved. Hard right. Through an alley. Hit the brakes. Killed the lights. The vans flew past. She didn't move. Waited 30 seconds. then drove again. The cold storage site was a relic. Concrete. Steel locks. No cameras. Inside, Elara pulled out the chip, inserted it into a secure reader. Files loaded. Names. Dates. Programs. Then photos. People she knew. Or thought she knew. One photo stopped her breath. It was Hill. V. Hill. Wearing a bureau pin. Standing in front of a director's podium. But the date in the corner said 1993. That wasn't possible. That face hadn't aged a day. Tessa leaned over. Elara, how old is this man? I don't know, she whispered. The files kept going. One folder caught her eye. Meridian Directive, 2025 p. Inside footage. Of her. But she had no memory of it. Her voice. Her movements. Her directing people in an underground chamber. No doubt. No fear. Just command. Just control. She backed away. The screen kept playing. Her voice echoed in the room. They'll believe the director. They always do. Phase 2 begins in 18 days. Tessa was crying now. Elara, what is this? I don't know, she said. But inside something cracked. Because she did. Somewhere deep down, she had always felt wrong. Like her timeline didn't quite add up. Like moments had been misplaced. Now she knew why. Someone had edited her. Planted a life. Used her as a carrier. And now that life was breaking. Outside, another rumble. Distant sirens. The screen blinked. Final message loaded. It was addressed to her. To E. Vance. From V. Hill. SUBJ, welcome back. Elara didn't read the rest. She didn't have to. Because everything she'd built, every case, every name, every truth was suddenly ash. There was no Director Vance. Not the way she thought. There was only what Hill left behind. And whatever came next. Elara turned to Tessa. We end this. Tonight. And from deep in the corner of the room, a light flicked on. There was someone else in the building. End of transmission.